Howdy. I'm back. I guess you all liked my presentation, as Dr. G asked me to come back and do this second chunk on Easter Island. But before we continue with our story of Easter Island, let's quickly look at the learning objectives for this chunk. The learning objectives for this chunk are as follows on the next slide. You can see the learning objectives on your computer screen. Take a few moments and read these over. The learning objectives are: the effect of rats with abundant food, and no predators. How the islanders gave soil a nutrient boost. Adaptability of the islanders. How can learning about Easter Island help us now as we deplete the earth of resources? Alright, to continue our story. Recently, two anthropologists have a new theory. Their theory is simply rather than a case of abject failure. What happened to the people on Easter Island is an unlikely story of success. When I first looked at the title of their paper, my response first was success. Are you kidding me? How could anyone call what happened on Easter Island a success? Well, I've read their book, The Statues That Walked, and oddly enough they've got a case. Although I'd say what they call success strikes me as just as scary. Maybe even scarier. Here's their argument. Professors Hunt and Lipo say fossil hunters and paleobotanists have found no hard evidence that the first Polynesian settlers set fire to the forest to clear the land. What is called large-scale prehistoric farming. Well, if they used fire, it should have left traces of carbon and burnt wood in the soil. But none has been found. The trees did die, no question. But instead of fire, Hunt and Lipo blame rats. Polynesian rats stowed away on those canoes, and Hunt and Lipo suggest that once the rats arrived, with no enemies and lots of palm roots to eat, they went on a binge, eating and destroying tree after tree, and multiplying at a furious rate. It was a rat's heaven. A recent lab study on Polynesian rats showed that Polynesian rat populations can double in 47 days. Throw a breeding pair onto an island with no predators and abundant food, and simple arithmetic suggests the result. Here a rat, there a rat, everywhere a rat. If the rats multiplied, as they did in the lab, the researchers have calculated that Easter Island would quickly have housed between 2 and 3 million of the varmints. Because among the favorite food sources of these rats are tree seeds and tree sprouts. They were the beavers of Easter Island. Humans surely cleared some of the forest. But the real damage would have come from the rats that prevented new growth. As the trees went, so did 20 other forest plants, 6 land birds and several seabirds. So, there was definitely less choice in food. A much narrower diet. And yet people continued to live on Easter Island. And food, it seems, was not their big problem. No big problem because there were rats to eat. May not sound appetizing to you or me. But the rats were a source of protein. I know you are thinking, where's the proof? Well, J.B. McKinnon reports in his new book, The Once and Future World, that archaeologists examined ancient garbage heaps on Easter Island looking for discarded bones, TV dinner trays and McDonald's hamburger wrappers. And only found bones. And that 60% of the bones came from those introduced rats. So, the inhabitants of Easter Island found a meat substitute. What's more, archaeologists have found that the Easter Island people were very creative. Although the island did not have much water, and its soil was not rich, the islanders took stones, broke them into bits, and scattered them onto open fields, creating an uneven surface. When wind blew in off the sea, the bumpy rocks produced a turbulent airflow, which resulted in a releasing of mineral nutrients present in the rock. This gave the soil just enough of a nutrient boost to support basic vegetables. Examination of the island shows that 0.1 of the island had these scattered rock gardens, and they would have produced enough food to sustain a population density similar to places like Oklahoma, Colorado, Sweden, and New Zealand today. Further evidence has been found through examination of Easter Island skeletons from that time. The skeletons show less malnutrition than people in Europe. And, when a Dutch explorer, Jacob Roggeveen, visited the island in 1722, he wrote that islanders didn't ask for food. They wanted European hats instead. And of course, starving folks typically don't have the time or energy to carve and shove 4,600 kilograms statues around their island. And, who ever heard of starving people asking for hats? So, you can see, things are not always as they first appear. Let this be an important lesson when you are out in the world practicing environmental geoscience. Critical thinking is the key. Clans and families on Easter Island didn't fall apart. It's true, the island became desolate and emptier. The ecosystem was severely compromised. And yet, say the anthropologists, Easter Islanders didn't disappear. They adjusted. They had no lumber to build canoes to go deep-sea fishing. They had fewer birds to hunt. They didn't have coconuts. But they kept surviving on rat meat and small helpings of vegetables. In other words, they made do. Science has provided new answers for the cause of the decline of East Island. But, one nagging question still exists. If everybody was eating enough, why did the population decline? Probably, the researchers suggest, is from sexually transmitted diseases after Europeans came visiting. The same fate happened to Indians in the New World when Columbus and his blokes came ashore. The important point of this story is complex. Okay, maybe there was no ecocide. Our nice, neat story of mess with Mother Nature, and she gets even, has been debunked. But, is this good news? Should we celebrate? I wonder. What we have here are two scenarios ostensibly about Easter Island's past, but really about what might be our planet's future. The first scenario, an ecological collapse, nobody wants that. But let's think about this new alternative, where humans degrade their environment, but somehow muddle through. Is that better? In some ways, I think this success story is just as scary, if not more so. What if the planet's ecosystem, as J.B. McKinnon puts it, quote, is reduced to a ruin? Yet its people endure, worshipping their gods and coveting status objects, while surviving on some futuristic equivalent of the Easter Islanders' rat meat and rock gardens. End quote. We humans are a very adaptable species. We've seen people become used to slums, adjust to concentration camps, learn to live with what fate hands them. If our future activities are to continuously degrade our planet, we lose plant after plant, animal after animal, forgetting what we once enjoyed, adjusting to lesser circumstances. Never shouting, "That's it," always making do. I wouldn't call that success. Would you? What I think the really scary part is that people can't remember what their great-grandparents saw, ate, and loved about the world. They only know what they know. To prevent an ecological crisis, we must become alarmed. that's when we'll act. The new Easter Island story suggests that humans may never hit the alarm. To give you an idea of what I mean, let me tell you a quick story Dr. G told me. When he was a kid growing up, his family could never afford orange juice. You know, the real kind, that is squeezed from real oranges. So, he never knew the real taste of orange juice. Then along came NASA, and the race for space. They invented an orange juice substitute, called Tang. When it first came out, everyone thought it was great. For the first time, Dr. G had orange juice. Tang was a bad, flat, synthetic orange juice, popularized by NASA. If you knew what real orange juice tasted like, Tang was no achievement. But, if you were like Dr. G, or you were an astronaut on a 50-year voyage to Mars, and you lose the memory of real orange juice, then gradually, you begin to think Tang is delicious. And, as he had never tasted real orange juice, Dr. G, though Tang was fantastic. Dr. G tells me he now has tasted real orange juice, and a few years ago he saw a container of Tang in the grocery store. As it brought back memories, he bought the container of Tang. He says he could not wait to get home and taste it. One sip, and the container and all went into the rubbish bin. He thought, how could he ever have liked that orange powder? The real lesson with Easter Island is, people learned to live with less, and forgot what it was like to have more. Maybe that will happen to us. There's a lesson here. But, it's not a happy one. As McKinnon puts it, quote, if you're waiting for an ecological crisis to persuade human beings to change their troubled relationship with nature, you could be waiting a long, long time. Unquote. There is fear today that our planet, an isolated island in space, may be reaching the same threshold faced by the people of Easter Island in the 16th century. In the 21st century, we are facing limitations of our resources in a variety of areas, including soils, fresh water, forests, rangelands, and ocean fisheries. The primary question from both an environmental perspective and in terms of the history of humans on Earth is, will we recognize the limits of Earth's resources before it is too late to avoid the collapse of human society on a global scale? Today there are no more frontiers on Earth, and we have a nearly fully integrated global economy. With our modern technology, we have the ability to extract resources and transform environment at rates much faster than any people before us. The major lesson for Easter Island is clear. Develop a sustainable global economy that ensures the survival of our resource base and other living things on Earth, or suffer the consequences. Some aspects of the history of Easter Island have recently been challenged as being only part of the story. I ask that you search and find a reading you can bring to your next campfire with Dr. G. Deforestation certainly played a role in the loss of the trees. And, rats that arrived with Polynesians were evidently responsible for eating the seeds of the palm trees, thus preventing regeneration. The alternative explanation is that the Polynesian people on Easter Island, at the time of European contact in 1722, numbered about 3,000 persons. His population may have been close to the maximum reached in about the year 1350. Following contact, introduced diseases and enslavement resulted in a reduction of the population to about 100 people by the late 1870s. As more of the story of Easter Island emerges from scientific and social research, the effects of human resource exploitation, invasive rats, and European contact will become clearer. The environmental lessons of the collapse. will lead to a better understanding of how we can sustain our global human culture. Now that we have completed this chunk, you should be able to describe the following learning objectives. Take time to look these over and make sure you can do each. The learning objectives are: the effect of rats with abundant food, and no predators. How the islanders gave soil a nutrient boost. Adaptability of the islanders. How can learning about Easter Island help us now as we deplete the Earth of resources? Oh. Here is that slide again, and the music. We have now come to the end of this chunk. So, I guess that brings my time with you all to a close. If you like what I had to say, tell Dr. G to invite me back again. And I want to thank you all, as I learned a new word during my time in Aggie Land. Gigam.